And welcome to the Eye for an Eye podcast, where we discuss idioms, cliches, and phrases that'll provide you a little wisdom throughout your day. Today's idiom we're going to talk about is from the 1800s. Um, it alludes to working hard to improving your own circumstances and overcoming challenges. You ready to talk about it, Brooklyn?
Let's talk about it, King.
All right, let's go. Welcome to the Eye for an Eye podcast, where we discuss cliches, phrases, and words of wisdom here from two old Marines that can take you back in the day and bring you all the way up into modern times. I am Mo Riley, aka Mr. Act Like It, and to my side is the incomparable Brooklyn Taylor. Brooklyn, what up, bruh?
What's up, King? Welcome.
Hey, welcome. Thanks for joining. Today, we're going to talk about something that I'm sure you've heard before. But the ironic thing about this particular phrase is that it actually has more than one meaning than we actually use. So we're going to talk about that. And today's phrase is pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Now, that sounds like something motivational. That's because it is. And we're going to talk about it. The goal of this podcast and the goal of every time we get together is to edify each other while edifying you and edifying the world. Just to give you a little history about this particular phrase, it actually originated here in America in the 1800s. All right? You know, early 19th century. But really, it wasn't meant as a motivational call. You know, in fact, it began as a sarcastic or humorous statement, believe it or not. One of the earliest known references happened back in 1834, where it was used to describe an impossible task, trying to lift yourself off the ground by pulling on your bootstraps. When you think about it in a logical sense, believe it or not, you can't actually stand in your freaking boots and pull yourself up. So that makes all the sense.
There's no leverage.
Sarcastic.
There's no leverage available to do that.
I swear to God, man. But somewhere around later on in the 1800s and 1900s here in America, we started using it more or less as a motivational call. And we're going to talk about that, but we're going to talk about this in varying degrees. One as motivation, but one as a kind of a smart aleck way of saying get your stuff together when it's something impossible. So, Brooklyn, what do you think about this particular phrase, man?
Like a lot of the phrases we've been coming across, on the surface, it seems helpful, but in the end, it ends up being what we discussed before, a banal platitude, right? You're asking someone to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And I came across a video of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You know, as a sidebar, I came across another video where they were talking about how people shorten things to try to make them irrelevant, right? Like, there's a difference between MLK and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So for the sake of our
pause, explain that. Please explain the difference, because I have never heard nobody say that before.
The difference is is shrinking something, right? And not just in a handy way, like we use acronyms to figure out what things were in the Marine Corps and remember more things, right?
Okay.
If you're just saying MLK, you can, on major holidays, use a couple quotes out of context and say MLK said this. But Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the man, he had a wide array of stances. And toward the end of his life, he was like, hey, we need to, similar to Malcolm X as well, we need to all get together, and it's really it's really the super elite. Basically, it's the billionaires against everybody else, and they're tricking us into fighting each other, right? And so when he was doing the boycotts and trying to speak for unions and trying to get poor working people together on one accord, that's when it got really dangerous for him, because it wasn't about black and white. It was about the powerful and the far less powerful. All similar with diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's very hard to argue that it's good to have diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it's very easy to say DEI is a bad thing, or DEI is unnecessary, or DEI is the devil, right? They just truncate it. They make everything smaller, and then they can change the meaning. It's not, you're trying to say, you don't have to say, I don't believe that Black Lives Matter, right? Or you don't have to say, you don't have to say Black lives don't matter, but you can say BLM is a bad organization, or BLM is a bad thing, DEI is a bad thing. At the time he was still alive, MLK was a terrorist, right? He only became a saint after he was killed. But
okay.
Anyway, back to what we're talking about. Pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is ridiculous. The laws of gravity won't allow it. The person who wins the World's Strongest Man contest can't do it, because you can't pull yourself up if you're inside the boots, right? You can pull. There are people strong enough to pick up someone heavier than them, but they would have to have their boots on the ground. They would have to have their feet firmly planted in order to do that. So even the idea of picking yourself up by your bootstraps is virtually impossible.
Yeah.
What do you think?
And that's why it was always somewhat of a joke. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Until somebody else decided that they were the smartest guy in the room and said, well, I know that you can't personally lift yourself up by your bootstraps, but what I can do is turn it into a figurative saying, which is, you got to be able to control your own world, and you got to be able to make change on your own, as opposed to, getting help. But the funny thing is, you brought up Martin Luther King, and I remember that speech, and I remember him saying that they tell us to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, but at the same time, the government was handing out land grants. The government was handing out low interest loans to those of us who weren't melanated, and all of these different things.
And also
like
people
that.
who came from other countries.
Right, and they came from other countries. So I get it. It's almost like, in a way, it's like a double entendre, except you're saying the same statement that could have two meanings, but really canceling out one. This is really, really a weird kind of. The history of this particular idiom is really, really strange, because it could have been very simple, but once again, we kind of made things complex. And as I was doing a little bit of research on the history of it, one thing in particular I noticed that people used it sarcastically, but the opposition always said, well, hey, look, this was a phrase that was used to kind of simplify complex situations, which I always thought was weird, but I get it. It's like life is not that simple, dude. You just can't just lift yourself out of your own situation. Right. You're kind of gonna need alliances. You're gonna need help or somebody else along the way. So people scoffed at it. But more and more, as you use things more and more, like they say, the bigger the lie, the more it's believed. So the more you cycle this particular phrase, the more people are going to start to use it the way that you intended, which is as a motivational call. Now let's talk about that motivational call, if you don't mind. When someone says you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, what we really don't think about is basically what they're saying is that you have the power to change your own situation. But nobody literally can change their situation on their own. It's like you don't become rich just by just waking up and making a decision to become rich. It usually takes, even if you create a product that you can get rich, it still takes advertising, unless you're the only one advertising. If you put it on social media, it usually requires somebody else to repost it. There's always someone else involved in you going from one situation to elevating to another. It's never just you by yourself. You know what I'm saying? So when I hear this particular phrase, I always think, okay, well, who gonna help me pull on the bootstraps? You know what I mean? Because if I can't do it, that means I need help. And even though we use it more or less as a motivational call, basically saying that, hey, look, you got to figure stuff out on your own. Granted, we do. We are the foundation of our own world. And we build this castle however we want. Or more or less, should I say, we build the foundation of the castle however we want. But there's still going to be involvement from other people in this particular realm. So guess what? That phrase, how we use it now, is kind of a load of shit. You know what I mean? It's a little bit of BS. What we really should be saying is group economics can solve a lot of issues for us. Partnerships and alliances can solve a lot for us. I mean, heck, if you remember, for a man, in order for a man to increase his status, and so did a woman, they usually had to marry, because you were marrying into families. If you were a young, ambitious man who, people may have saw that had potential, yes, maybe a millionaire would let you marry his heir, his daughter, because we see that you're trying to get it on your own. But if I bring you into this particular family, guess what? I, in fact, will be able to give you a little bit of guidance, but also maybe kind of even the odds, or at least increase the odds a little bit more in your favor. Hell, that was the purpose of marriage, to align two families to gain more power or more riches. Maybe you had the goats, but I had the feed. And if our families married together, then we could doggone create and breed goats to the point where we could sell these goats and become wealthy, or, your goats fertilize my feed. Fertilize the lawn from the grass that they're eating. And guess what? Now I got even more foliage for them to eat. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, this particular quote, I don't advise anybody to use it unless you're in fact being sarcastic. Like, hey man, you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, because we know it's a load of bullshit. What do you say, bro?
Yeah, I agree. I wrote it down. The particular Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. quote is, "It's all right to tell a man to lift himself by his own bootstraps, but it is cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps." And that's what happens, right? Like, that's what happens. People will tell you, well, why can't you be successful at this? All I got was a $10 million loan from my parents. All my parents did was put 50% down on my house. Why can't you afford a house?
You remember during the election, sorry to cut you off, but you made me think of that. Remember Mitt Romney was telling people, he was like, well, if you don't have it, just ask your parents for $20,000 to get you started. Talk about cognitive dissonance. You know what I'm saying? As if everybody's parents got 20 G's just laying around. Well, but it also makes you think that if you had pulled yourself up by the bootstraps, you may actually have $20,000 when you think about it. So that's why this phrase is so freaking cool.
Here's the thing. What I realized in our world is that everyone is operating from their own life experience, right? And so because of that, I don't think Mitt Romney had friends and colleagues from the west side of Detroit
Nope.
and from Brooklyn, right? So he's not familiar with any situation in which your parents didn't have 20,000 lying around to help you with your house down payment, or 100,000 or $1 million to help you with your all of the stories, the American billionaire stories. They start with the proverbial guys in the basement or guys in the garage. Hey, we were in my parents' garage. Yes, but your parents were very rich and influential and on the board of computer companies or on the board of or governor of a state. So there's an advantage there, and that's why it takes a unicorn, right? For every Jay-Z who drops out of high school and still becomes a billionaire, I mean, that's so rare. It's laughable how rare that is, right? You have to be supremely talented and a business person, and there's really no way to even achieve that without, in many ways, being incredibly and completely ruthless. So that's what it is, right? And even then, you're not pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, because there's going to be hundreds or thousands of people, and in some cases millions. Like if you're doing something like you're a musician and you sell 1 million records, that's 1 million different people or 2 million people going out and purchasing that. We're older, so we remember when people physically went to go buy music. Now it's just on your phone or your iPad or your laptop. Someone's
You
going
don't
to be
even
listening.
have to leave the bed to get to it. You're right.
You don't have to leave the bed. Somebody's going to be listening to this so far in the future that there's they're going to be like, what's a phone and what's an iPad and what's a laptop? Like, it's because, it's going to be in a microchip or in something small or in just embedded in your brain or in your glasses. But yeah, it's
heck, they got all of that right now.
Right. But just like we remember cassettes. We remember vinyl records, tapes, and we remember CDs and DVDs, and we remember what's the other thing? When
MP3s,
iPods. I don't think anybody has an iPod now. Think about that.
It was MP3s. That's what they called it.
iPhone. What's that?
You're right. I said it was called an MP3. You may have an MP3 player.
Right. And an iPod was a form of MP3 player. But But it just kept going to the point where, I haven't seen someone, I found one in my house at some point and I was just like, this is not going to be very useful. I mean, maybe someone who at the gym or something still uses them. But anyway.
You should keep it, man. It's a great collectible, man. It's a historic artifact because a lot of people have junked those, believe it or not. I still have a case full of DVDs and a case full of CDs sitting in my closet, bro. I did not get rid of them.
Yeah, sure.
For archiving sake,
Hey, look, you never know when something may turn around and come in handy, right? I mean,
yeah. But moving on in the conversation, man, because I don't want to get away from the mere fact that this is now a motivational call, So let's think about it. When you say pull yourself up by your bootstraps, what are you really saying to a person?
You're telling them to get off their tail, right?
Exactly.
Like,
get off your ass and do something. Now, we all don't, success can be defined by each one of us individually, but it takes a one word that I use a lot, especially when I'm talking to like a teenager and whatnot. I call it, and you've used it, I'm sure, many a times before, and we use it definitely a lot in the Marine Corps, and that word is initiative. A lot of times, in order to pull yourself up by the bootstraps, you just really got to take the initiative. And if you do something, let's say when I got into tech, right? somebody actually said something to me about getting into IT, and I heard it, and I was. But then when I did a little bit of research, and I'm like, wow, this is a field that's gonna be booming. Maybe I need to join the doggone parade so I ain't left behind, because climbing up on ladders to work on planes, my knees and my back kind of disagree with a brother. You know what I'm saying? So I decided, let me look at another form of making money, but without the wear and tear. That was me taking the initiative. Then I reached out to a good friend of mine, and fortunately enough for me, and this is what I talk about, when you take the initiative, good things begin to happen and come your way. You know what I mean? My friend got a school. You know what I'm saying? Sat down, taught me certain aspects of IT, and now I'm sitting here as a certified cloud engineer. Now I get to work from home as opposed to going to somebody's hangar. So had it not started with me saying, I want to see where this goes and trying, it would have never have happened. No matter how much guidance I got from anybody else, no matter how much good advice somebody gave me, even if somebody had to pay for me to go to the school, it wouldn't have mattered, because it was just me deciding to do this. And I implore everybody out there that if you're in a tight spot and you're not sure what to do, and you're seeing on YouTube all these different means of making money, or you hear people talk about do this, do that, make a decision and go in that path, but do something that you think that you will enjoy. That's how you take the initiative. Sometimes all it starts is just with a Google. Sometimes all you got to do is look something up. Oh, that sounds interesting enough. And it could lead you to another site. It could lead you to another site. It could lead you to somewhere else. But pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, I think that it is very important, especially when you're talking about us. And you know what I mean by us. A lot of us like to look for a reason not to do something, because we're always looking at the inconveniences, or we're looking at how hard something may be, or we're looking at the amount of time that it takes, and we don't think we have enough time. So what we do, we fill our head up with excuses, But if you can I tell you what, why don't you try pulling yourself up by the bootstraps every day? We know it's impossible, but if you get there and put on your boots and pull, you actually are trying something, even though you kind of banging your head up against the wall, because it won't happen. But nevertheless, the goal is to motivate people to get off your
That
ass
reminds me of something.
And be about some shit. Go ahead, bro.
That reminds me, what you said about excuses reminds me of a quote, and I had to look it up real quick. Excuses are tools of incompetence used to build bridges to nowhere and monuments of nothingness, and those who use them seldom specialize in anything else.
Anything else, you're right. That is a very prominent quote.
Rudyard Kipling.
Yeah. My fraternity uses that a lot. As a matter of fact, when I was going through indoctrination, I had to learn that particular phrase before I became an iota, because that literally sums up the ideals of joining iota Phi Theta fraternity. Shameless plug.
Shout out to the iotas.
Yeah. Shout out to the iotas. Shout out to the D9 family. But yeah, man. So,
yeah,
when you think about
I like that. From that
phrase,
perspective, yes. Some things do have their uses, and it's like there are times when it's sarcastic and it's a cruel joke, and then there are times when it's like, listen, it's about action, right? We can't be even filming this podcast without a mindset of action. This is the plan. This is what we're going to discuss. This is when we're going to discuss it. This is the platform on which we're going to record it. And this is how we're going to get it out and disseminate it to the public, right? So action has to take place. And that's what it is. And you can decide, you can think you're going to do something, but until you're taking action and moving, putting one foot in front of the other, putting pen to paper, or in this case, thoughts to audio and video recording, you're just talking.
Sometimes that's all people need. Sometimes when I was in church, we used to always say, all I need is a word. You know what I mean? Like, that's all people need sometimes is just a word to begin to do something. Sometimes all it takes is somebody saying, hey, man, I think you would be good at this. And before you know it, you done inspired a whole entire thought. You've inspired a whole entire research. Like, I just graduated from AI class, right? And it was
Congratulations.
something that I was, oh, well, thank you. But it was always something I was curious about, but I myself just didn't even have the wherewithal. Like, I didn't even know where to begin to research and search. I didn't even understand the foundations of it. I didn't understand what a prompt was, but I was always curious. And I played around with Chat GPT, asking it to write emails for me or letters for me, to kind of make things. But the more I got into it, it just so happened that somebody, the Power of Tech Foundation, just so happened to have a class that they were giving. And they were just like, hey, we're teaching this AI and cloud course. Do you want to take it? And I'm like, man, I've been curious about this for months. Absolutely, yes. And it has changed the way that I see. The world has kind of changed the way I've seen a lot of things. Heck, using AI, I've already created a fitness program for the next 30 days. It's printed out me a schedule. It's told me what exercises to do that don't require weights from a gym. It's given me everything that I need. Heck, I've even created a daily schedule with it to ensure that I'm able to get journaling in, that I'm able to get quiet time in and other things like that. So, but it all started with one thing, a mind to do something about it. And then everything else just kind of came at me all at one time. So,
That's
but
great.
here in my notes, man, I wrote something down that spoke more to the critical view of it. And it says here that in recent years, the phrase has seen a partial return to its original tone. It says being used ironically to question the fairness of expecting people to succeed without adequate support. And that's the reason why this particular phrase seems outdated, because it's like, wait a minute, people need support. People need a helping hand, to do anything. Heck, I remember when you graduated from college, man. I remember you and I being in the Marine Corps, and you always talking about, I'm going to go back to school. Now, it was never a thought of mine at the time. But guess what? I remember you we were 18, 19? And you were talking about, yeah, man, I'm going to go back to school, man. And it didn't take what we think is the quick route, which is that 2.5 to 4 years. It took a little bit longer, but I was proud that day, man. You walked across that stage, bro. And that to me was pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, because you thought about, hey, I need to go back to school. You made the decision. You had to look into financing options, because last I checked, you wasn't 22 with $1 billion in the bank, what I'm saying? So you had to figure it out, and congratulations to you, by the way, on that. And now look at you, got your master's, So yeah, man. But I'm happy for you, man. But anything else to add to this particular phrase?
I think that both sides of the discussion are true. There's a lot of condescension and sarcasm when some people say it, but it also, if you're motivating yourself, I think that's kind of key. If you're motivating yourself and you're like, okay, I have to take action, this is what I'm going to do. While you cannot physically, the laws of physics won't allow you to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you can be motivated and you can make positive changes in your own life. And, we always, like we do with each other and everybody else we know, we always applaud positive change. We always applaud someone taking their destiny into their own hands, because, if you don't, No, it's like the old phrase: if you don't work on your dream, you'll be hired to work on someone else's.
Somebody else's.
And that's just how life goes. And so you have to decide for yourself, and then you have to take action. So it's a two-part thing. You have to decide to go to school, and then go to school. You have to decide to open a law firm, and then open the law firm. Like you have to, but action is always required. Decisiveness is required, and then action is required.
Absolutely. And you know what? We're going to go ahead and we're going to leave it right there because you said it perfectly. Action is required. And that's the reason why this particular phrase has not went anywhere. So thank you guys for joining. Once again, this is the Eye for an Eye podcast. I'm Mo Riley, aka Mr. Act Like It. And I have my brother Brooklyn Taylor here. We'd like to thank you for taking the time out to listen to us. Hopefully you got something out of it. If you got any questions or you got any comments or you got anything you want to add to this particular, please, by all means, go ahead and leave it in the comments. And don't forget to hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. I've actually been seeing our subscriptions going up, bro.
Good.
The word is getting out.
Good. I'm glad to see that.
There's a couple of past middle-aged men, because to me middle age is like in your late 30s, all things considered, but I'm glad to see that more people were tuning in, man, and I'm thankful for that, man. But like I said, man, everyone, I want you to have a wonderful day, have a wonderful life, be good to yourself and be good to others. This is the Eye for an Eye podcast. Brooke, take us home, bro.
Thank you, everybody, for showing up. Thank you for listening to us. We always appreciate your feedback. So just like my boy Mo said, have a great day, have a great week, have a great life. Do something positive for the people around you. Show love and, live in the right way. We're out.
Eye for an Eye, y'all.